Hello, we are having a fun Brave Nation today. This is maybe the first time that we are inviting more than one person and more than a couple people on the podcast. And I just thought I'd open this up for questions because, as you know, education in general in the whole nation is a big hot topic. And as you can tell, if you've been listening to me for any length of time, you know that education is near and dear to my heart. This podcast is all about creating significant cultural reform. And I believe that education is a huge key to creating reform in our culture. And so everything that happens in education matters. And it just occurred to me that I could ask our current commissioner of education, Deena Bishop, to come on the podcast. Now, I've heard Deena, um, be a superintendent. I've watched her as she's gone into being a commissioner for the state of Alaska. And what I love about her is she's able to have really frank but also respectful conversations about topics that people are really charged up about. And so, welcome, Deena, to the show. And for all of the people on, if you have a question as she's talking, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. We're going to stay muted, so if you can keep yourself muted, that would be great. And welcome, Deena.
Thank
Tell
you.
us a little bit more about yourself and where we are with Alaskan education today.
Sure. I'm a mom and a grandma, so just so everyone knows, those things are dear to my heart. But I moved to Alaska in 1990, right when I graduated college. And so, being that we are where we are today, I've had quite a journey in public education. I've always worked in public education, began as a teacher in the Copper River School District, so a very small school district, and then moved into the Mat-Su Borough, where the majority of my career was spent for over 24 years there. And I had every job from a teacher. I coached a lot. I sponsored activities, was an assistant principal, worked at the district office, and then did become a superintendent out there. And then in 2016, I moved into Anchorage and spent 6 years. And I did step out for a little bit thinking I would retire in 2022. And just life circumstances changed for me, and retirement wasn't the time. And so I was stepped back in as commissioner at the request of Governor Dunleavy and the State Board of Education. So it's about 35 years in the state and just enjoy every minute of it. I was a math teacher, so I love the data part of things, but my understanding and my involvement in public education and the goals that we have for youth, really at this pinnacle point, we just need to, in my opinion, put parents back in the driver's seat of their students' education. During the pandemic, parents learned a lot. Many of them liked it, and they liked knowing about more things and really want to have a higher degree of involvement in any school that their kid goes to. And so my support is for schools that work for children and families, and that's what the governor and I both stand behind. And just delighted to be here with you today. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, awesome. Yeah. And I want to hear a little bit more about the backstory of education in Alaska. Governor Dunleavy's background in education. I know he has an extensive background in education and kind of the vision that he went into it with, and then, your role in that and where we stand with the controversies today. Kind of just give us a nutshell of where we are today.
Sure. Governor Dunleavy came up years ago after college. He was a basketball player, if you didn't know that, and also but he settled in Western Alaska, so around Kotzebue areas where his education career began in Alaska, and then worked odd jobs, got married to someone from Kotzebue, spent the majority of his career there. And interestingly enough, I got to meet him when I was a fellow principal in the Mat-Su Valley. And so I was a principal of an elementary school, Cottonwood Creek, near and dear to my heart as well, where my children went. And became the principal at that time. When he was in Kotzebue, he was a teacher principal, and then he was the superintendent of Kotzebue as well. And then when he moved his family in and he has a farm out here, some land, and in the Mat-Su Valley. And he took the lead job of a school called Mat-Su Central School. And at the time, it was called Mat-Su Correspondence School. So that was his first opportunity to really lead a school of choice that works for parents, and made that, and through his tenure and working in the district, he really changed that from a school of under 500 to now over 20, I think about 2,700 students, and really a school of choice. So that was the beginning of when I met him as a colleague. And then during the time that I was the assistant superintendent, he was the chair of the school board out here in Mat-Su Valley. He was an elected official and had since retired and then come back to be an elected official. And I worked with him. The superintendent abruptly, I don't know if you know the history, but the superintendent Matsu abruptly passed away due to a surgery back in 2011. Just he was going on for a routine surgery and went through complications, passed away. And at that time, the board came out and asked me. So Governor Dunleavy said, we need you to be the superintendent. I was like, no, I don't want that. But that is really, so he was my boss. And I want to say that I tell him that actually he was one of my best bosses because he really, he set expectations for what he would like to have happen and allowed me to work through the avenues to get those goals done. And those goals haven't changed that he has now, is to really think about how our youth and our families experience school, ensure that the schools that we provide as a public institution, a public system, meet those goals. We don't have the kinds of schools that we're used to or that we always want. We have to understand what are the needs of our families. And he set that up, and then he left. I remained there, and he left and moved on to be a senator. And as you know, has continued his really opportunities to allow for really school options and empowering parents to be able to choose those, as well as students to choose them. He believes in the public school system. His children went to public school, but he does see that the public school really to be to be successful as we move into the future with just the world changing and engagement and trust of parents need to be brought back to public education. And part of that is allowing really honoring all school options and not passing judgment on them, and really creating programs in our state that families like. So our history goes way back, but again, we're colleagues in the early 2000s, just as worked in the same district, and I've always had a respect for his stand on things. He's an innovator, so he talked about what he talks about today. Nearly 20 years ago, and it hasn't changed. So I have a respect for that, and just enjoy working for him to see what we can do in the state of Alaska.
Yeah, so where is education in Alaska right now? If you were going to diagnose it, where we stand here?
Sure. So we need improvement. We have pockets of excellence, because you probably know parents that absolutely love their teacher and love their schools, but we're not doing that ubiquitously across the state. And the governor has proposed just some investments, actually $180 million. He had a bill out for $180 million additional dollars into public education that were really tied with outcomes that he would like to see. So policy changes along with school investment. And some of those policies are around an open enrollment. That is language that really shares that parents should be able to, given space in a school, be able to enroll in a school of their choice, and that because they are in one neighborhood or not be denied that. And that would be cross districts. If a district is near, we have some small islands that have districts that, students could choose, and parents, and that he believes the state would pay for that. So if you crossed borders, then the state should pay that new district, because what we want to have established are, again, just success for schools for kids, and they're not all the same. And I started by saying I'm a mom and a grandmom, and I can tell you I had two daughters, and I fed them the same. I thought I loved them the same and everything, and they were very different in school. One was a very serious student, couldn't wait to get out of the drama of high school and just couldn't wait to move on. And my other one wishes probably she was in high school today, because she was a very social butterfly and loved the sports. And had the middle college been around when my daughter, she just talks about how she would have enjoyed high school a lot more because she just didn't fit in, really. She didn't feel like she fit in, the just traditional high school. And she did well, but every day it was a little bit of, why do I need to do this?
Yeah.
Come on, you need to get to school. So, the learning wasn't a problem for her, but really that overall experience in a school that may have been too big for her to be, just socially and feel comfortable in her own skin wasn't there because she was a very serious student. And
Mhm.
so, that's where we are. And so the governor's bill honors that open enrollment. We've had some
That bill
situations.
is
Oh, go ahead.
SB 82, is that right?
That is correct. Yeah. Yeah. And the other version in the House is going to be heard this next Wednesday. They did take some versions of his bill and try to weave them into HB 69, but I can just share that those attempts were the outcomes would not be the same. We had some wording, but again, it's putting limitations on the ability of teachers and parents to work together to be able to facilitate just high quality learning. And the other thing, when I want to talk about teachers and students or teachers and parents, charter schools as a choice is a great choice. And the districts that I've worked in have had choice. There's lots of choice in Anchorage. There's like lots of choice in Matsu. But the difference between some there's some choices that are decided at the administrative level and driven down. And then other choices really rise up from parents and teachers. And I would say that charter schools are really that grassroots effort of innovation, of good ideas and teachers coming together with parents. And many times in our system, charter schools have not really been moved to the level that they could be moved to, and maybe, for lack of a better word, slow rolled. And when you don't know the jargon and the bureaucracy and in education, sometimes it could become difficult to begin a charter school. And so his goal was to just really have some opportunities for parents and teachers to work either at the state board level or local. We heard loud and clear that folks want to leave it at local level, and that's fine. But what he then is looking at language is to allow a school board and an administration to hear out a charter school within a timely manner and really provide feedback. So his
Yeah.
provisions are not to say rubber stamp anything. It's actually to say listen and you have to provide the opportunity
Mhm.
in your school system to hear these out. And
Yeah.
so that's what that was about. But he also put more money into for all schools for career technical education, so that there's additional investments even in elementary school for opportunities, outdoor experimental opportunities, as well as work skills or just other innovative opportunities that you can offer in middle school and high school for students to learn parts of understanding careers as well as skills that they might use both in the trade and professional side of careers. He has also looked at supporting additional transportation money, as well as I made some notes, direct teacher payments. One of the things that came clear to have really high competition for teachers nowadays is across the nation, as you know, that fewer teachers are coming out of university. We have started some apprenticeship programs and some recruitment and retention. And when we did a survey, one of the first items that came back from our teachers was that compensation mattered. And so they suggested bonuses or try to impact compensation and try to get it as close to the classroom as you can. And so the governor came out with direct teacher payments for teachers. In rural Alaska, it would be a lot more. In those remote areas, it would be 15,000, and then a 10,000 level and a 5,000 level. And it really is based on the remoteness of the area and the difficulty in recruiting teachers. And
Yeah.
with that, also the governor, one of the big pieces was in correspondence school at this present time. Correspondence students experience things like career and technical. They are gifted students. They could have special needs, and so we call these the special needs factor.
Yeah.
And it's a multiplier that school districts would receive to be able to support their correspondence schools in serving students. And his request was to include that special needs factor
Yeah.
in the funding formula for school districts to support correspondence families as well in those special needs factor.
Yeah.
And
And that's a huge
so
deal because charter schools don't get any funding for special needs, correct?
Well, charter schools do not have, they receive their funding and then they would have, so it's a difference. So it's charter schools or charter school correspondence schools. So
Yes.
those are different. So the correspondence schools, it really depends, but there really isn't additional funding to support the families that are in those correspondence charter schools or in regular correspondence to support with the special education in those items that the school district really does provide or have tutoring for students. And we also, for students, just so everyone knows, in traditional neighborhood schools as well, there is tutoring services used outside the school as well as in the school. So we really wanted this as a lot of our correspondence students now are really participating in a blended model where they do some courses in and some out of the school. We wanted to value that aspect that those needs are taken care of.
Yeah, I can say I'm one of those parents who's stepped up and tried to find other ways to educate my children. And I think, seeing the crisis that we have in education, seeing we're bottom of the barrel as far as the country, with our test scores. And I know test scores aren't everything, but even people leaving the public system because it's not fitting their needs, those are the kids that I deal with on a daily basis. And I know that Alaskans, we like our liberty, we like our independence, right? And so having
Yeah.
these choices, I think, is amazing. When people come from out of state, they really value the choices that we're given with the allotment program and things like that. But it seems like there is a an opposition to that right now. And I know there's a couple different conversations. One is about the funding and that kind of increase the BSA at all costs and don't allow for any like don't hinder us. Let us do what we want to with the money. And then there's this other conversation on the other side. Let's not increase the BSA as much, or let's, because we want to preserve our PFD because it doesn't seem like
Mhm.
we have enough money. And then on that other side, it's like, well, let's at least provide some checks and balances. Let's provide competition to where we know we're getting a good bang for our buck, right? Because
That's
the charter,
absolutely it. Yeah.
yeah, the charter schools are doing it on a shoestring of what other schools are doing, and yet
Yeah.
they don't always get the same kind of attention.
Yeah, and one of the things about charter schools is that they do, for the most part, pay for their housing. And so they're using their operational monies for most of them, unless they were able to move into an older school, but then they would have upkeep and maintenance of that school. They're paying for those operational costs or their capital costs through their operations. And so it is pretty straining, and it isn't apples and apples when you talk about neighborhood schools. But I'm going to share some statistics. So and whether you like testing or not, some people like it and some people don't, but what it does provide is it shows you the delta or that there's a difference and in student performance, school performance. And so the National Assessment of Education Progress is controlled. It's really run out of the federal government. And so you have a mind's eye. We have a state test, but this is the National Assessment of Education Progress called NAEP. And that is where Lee mentioned that we're pretty much at the bottom of the barrel. So we are score 49 out of 50. Actually, there's 51 because they do Puerto Rico, 52 sometimes, depending. Puerto Rico does math, but not English or English language arts, but we do have DC as well. So there's more than 50, but 52 at times or 51. And we score anywhere between 49 to 52. And we have since for over 20 years. So it isn't just the pandemic. I don't want people to use that as an excuse. It was a terrible time. And just as a superintendent, I was responsible and think to myself all the time, like, what could I have done differently to get the board to vote to bring us back? And it was a struggle. But here's NAEP. So NAEP overtime given, and we're behind. And it was the first time this last year that they took a longitudinal study of NAEP over the last, I believe, 10 years. So it's 5 administrations because it's every other year. And they pulled out charter schools across the nation. And I was contacted by a Harvard researcher about like just calling me like, I just did this study and I've studied this all the time, and Alaska's always last and your charter schools are number 1 in the nation for outcomes. And I was like, whoa, that is good. Let me see. And of course, everybody wants to poke holes in it. So I was asking him why, and we were talking back and forth. So our ranking is number one. And here's why it's so important to look at the parental choice. The parental choice is for everyone. But one of the things when I was in Anchorage and in Matsu, a lot of times it's like, well, those are those special kids. And I want to share with you the data did not demonstrate that. There's a couple of federal demographics that we have to report on that this researcher pulled out, and one was non-white. So they compare white kids to non-white kids. When we took the non-white kids out, Alaska dropped in its ranking. So it was the non-white kids in our charters that helped us move up.
And this is
When
national. This is
national,
related directly to Alaska. Yes.
this is related directly to Alaska, and so we know what our charter schools are because there were only 20 of them that have fourth and eighth grade. But this is what's interesting because you don't really get school level data for NAEP. You only get state level data. So we don't know the kids and all that, but you would have had to have had a fourth grade and an eighth grade test because that's what NAEP is, fourth and eighth grade. And then when they took out what's called low SES, so low socioeconomic status, kids who are poor. They took those kids out and we dropped again. So our ranking for our charter schools is truly an option that is really having kids of different demographics that you would think would not participate in charters being successful. And this, when we did show it last year to the legislature, I mean, people just dismissed it. But this gentleman said, you have something here and we don't know what it is, but you should continue whatever you're doing. Because for your kids who are generally not served in public schools that fall behind, for some reason, you are being overly served in charter schools. You literally moved out from 49 to number one when you just look at your charter schools.
Wow.
So knowing that the governor really has pushed for those school options and that open enrollment so that parents have that choice to move their kids into schools that they'd like. Also with it's a nominal transportation fee, but to help with transportation as well. His other bill is also for tribal compacted schools, which would allow a tribal entity, only 5, because it's just a demonstration project. So we had 5 that we've been working with for the last 18 months to open up a school, and it wouldn't necessarily be a charter school because a charter school falls under a district, but the tribe would actually operate its school as the entity that would have the board and to try those tribal schools. And they're public schools, so they would not just be for Native students that belong to that tribe. They're public schools for anyone. Right now, there's a Native charter school, a Connect charter out in the Matsu Valley, for instance, and has about 300 students in it. And it's a charter school now. They don't know if they're going to move to a tribal school. They're just going to see what works best for them and their students and their families. But there are Native kids and non-Native kids that attend that. But basically, they just move the education and involve the parents of the type of experience they want their children. And they're super successful, do not have an attendance problem. And so it's this idea, again, to find the programs and the schools that really match what parents would like. And I was a principal of a neighborhood school, and it was a special school to me, and my children loved it. And I was so fortunate to be at that school with them. And that, I have a love, and my kids have a love of their elementary school, which was a regular neighborhood school. And so those are valuable. Charters are valuable. Homeschools are valuable. We just want to be able to open it up and say, if a school is good for a kid and a family and they're learning, that should be the school we support.
Right.
Hands down, not try to work against each other.
Right. Yeah. And, it seems like it's common sense because if you're choosing the school that you attend, you're going to be more invested in it. You're going to appreciate it more. And I think about, people are like, well, some parents don't care and all of this stuff. And maybe it's only going to be the parents that are super engaged that go to these things. And that's why they're doing well. But the data actually shows from the national standpoint that even when school choice is enacted at a high level, that even the kids who stay make no changes whatsoever to their educational program, their scores actually go up. They actually
Mhm.
see greater progress because of that competition that causes the
Absolutely.
schools to become better and to not lose families,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I ran Cottonwood Creek, and then a good friend of mine, colleague, her name is Barb Gerard, and she ran Academy Charter, which was across town. And when we would like check our scores, and how our students are learning at the end of the year, we always scored higher in reading, and she scored higher in math. And we were like, "What are you doing, Barb?" And she would ask me, "What are you doing?" And so we both moved to Saxon Spalding schools, and just chose our curriculum because we learned off of each other about how our students would learn. And that's what, just in a district with good leadership, that's what you can engender, instead of, this is my school, that's your school. And even within a district, I've been in a district, and in different districts, where even the choices within the districts sometimes aren't honored by all the employees. And it makes me crazy, because I'm thinking, different teachers teach in those different schools, different parents go to those, different siblings go to those different schools. And so really, again, focus on a good school for a kid and a parent. And then if we get that right, things will be better for public education. That trust will come back. I just know it. And I do believe, I'm a strong believer in public education, and knowing that it's a cornerstone of our democracy. It is so meaningful, but we're missing the mark when we exclude our families.
Yeah. And, I think about when people talk about results based and accountability, and whether, the only other thing you can look at for results based in my mind, other than test scores, is where are the kids going? Are they leaving? Are they exiting the school system, even with no real incentive to do so? To me, when people start voting with their feet and they don't even have 100% school choice, that tells you that it's not meeting their needs fully. So,
Mhm.
and that's what we're seeing, at least in Anchorage here. We're seeing a huge exodus even since COVID. Of course, we had the COVID
Mhm.
exodus, but now we're starting to see just organic
Yep.
exodus of kids trying to find, and they're not leaving the state. They're just
Mhm.
saying this isn't working for me, and so they're trying to find other options. And
Mhm.
that to me, that if we don't capture that part of it, we're gonna lose more and more funding, because no matter how high the student base allocation is, it's it's not going to make a difference if all the kids leave.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's really why schools are closing. It's due to enrollment, because if you understand the formula, a school of it in itself is a moneymaker. Like, it's based, so you have your base student allocation, and you get a multiplier for every school that you have that's small,
Right.
and then less money for schools that are big. So having a smaller school with smaller student enrollment actually is a benefit. It just, there comes to a balance of like when you can save money or not, and in other services like transportation or that administration. But generally, it is the loss of students that really drive school closure more so than money. And I think Anchorage, initially when they started closing, they said it's due to money. This year they said due to loss of enrollment, and that's really more. I said I'm a math teacher, and I know how to really work through to make the BSA work for you on different programs. And when I was in Anchorage, just understanding that, started the middle college, because that was so successful in the Valley. And we tried to partner when I was in the Valley with Anchorage, and at the time they just didn't want to. But then, you know, what that is the school that basically the kids are just going to college. And so you're able to use that school funds to pay for university. It's not for everybody, but it's powerful. But the students BSA and that school funding formula paid for that. And so it works. It's good. If you are from Anchorage, and it was King Career Center, that was just a center that you went to for extras, in careers. King Career Center is a school now, has more programs because it's generated as a school. Where about of their 1,000 kids, 800 are part-time, but there's 200 full-time kids at that school now.
Mhm. So just straight up, are we going to lose our PFD? Is this or do can we pay for this? All of this?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. You know what? The bill that just was moved, I can't imagine that it could be paid for. And it really doesn't have any accountability built into it.
69,
And
you're
and
referring
I've
to HB 69?
HB 69, it was actually at the CS. So it's a RCS, which means it's a resolution was added to it. And it's a committee substitute for HB 69, which was just passed out as Senate Ed yesterday. And I think it's a terrible bill. It has money in it and investment, which is a good thing, but investment without sharing what you expect to happen with that investment is not going to help young people. I am letting you know there was more money that could be spent during the COVID times, and money alone does not, when we just cry out for money, but the changes in public education and student success is going to come from strong policy as well. And I do think the governor and Senator Begich at the time, they passed the READS Act. In this is the last year was the full year of implementation, the first full year, and the significant growth in K1 of being on target was amazing. And if we could keep this trajectory, we'll show some of those differences that Florida did and Mississippi did, having a really strong phonics, phonemic awareness-based science of reading background. And that has to be taught in all of our schools now. And in the past, it was known, but it was voluntary. Like you could do it or you didn't have to do it. And so think about parents who believe, their kids going to school and their teacher didn't have to do it if they didn't want to. What we know is best for kids, and it's brain science now, that we all learn reading the same. We hear sounds. And if you've ever learned another language, that's how you do it. You learn vocabulary and you're immersed in it, but you also have to know the sounds of that alphabet. And so we're real happy with that. But that was policy that drove that. And so money and investment with policy does matter. But right now, the bill is so far out there. And I want to share that we have to. I am a believer in protecting the PFD. I was able to travel out to rural Alaska and visit a town called Teller. And it's not usually by road. You have to fly in there, but because it was summer in the tundra, I drove from Nome over there. It was a couple hours, and it's in the Bering Strait School District. And the school has the only well water, running water, because they have a well, the only flushing toilets in the town. They're still using honey buckets. And I just so happened to go, and it was after Labor Day. So it was late summer, if you will, or, Indian summer. It was in September. And I saw the honey bucket bags. They explained to me what outside of all these homes. And some homes had these just piled high as the house. And they said, actually, those are the honey bucket bags. So it was the human waste. And I just said, oh my gosh, why is it? And the gentleman said, well, there is a pickup once a week, but it's $50 a month. And so, as soon as their PFD comes in, they'll be able to help with that.
Wow.
I went into the store there that's run by the local tribe, and the shelves were empty. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do people buy? What do they eat here? And where do they buy their groceries? And they said, oh, well, some will go into, Nome, they'll buy them and they'll bring them here. But our our supply is being barged up here. And I was like, oh, well, like school's in, it's September. And he said, oh, well, people won't have money to buy until their PFDs come, because their subsistence, that's their lifestyle
Right.
subsistence, and they'll fish and everything. And I'm like, so to say, we're going to take away a livelihood and just something that is really built into a community. Like I just saw the differences of how much that PFD means to people to buy real supplies for living, as opposed to, some people say, oh, we don't need it. It's, just my slush fund. For some people in Alaska, and many people in Alaska, this is how they pay their oil bill. This
Right.
is how they're going to store their food for the winter, and those odds and
And
ends,
some
or
families
have
use it for
beans
education,
paid.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, it is meaningful. And, because we are so diverse, when we, get together and just say, well, we have one voice and it's just the loudest voice in the room, we should listen to the other voices in the room.
Yeah,
Always.
for sure.
Mhm.
We have some questions here. Kim asks, has the overall student enrollment in Alaska's public schools declined as a whole?
It has, and I'm going to share some data because I have the data from 20 to 2000, or 2000 rather, to 2024. If you can believe it, only 4,000 students over that 24 years left, 4,000 total. So when you talk about it, and that was just, we're in FY25, and so this would have been last year. And so only, in those year up till last year, only 4,000 people left. But the difference is that people chose a different type. And so if you, because I shared how we were trying to get school districts to have more investment for students that are correspondents in those years. We started with about 8,000 students in 2000 in correspondence. And last year it was almost 23,000. And
Wow.
so when you don't need, so not only did you lose the 4,000, which isn't much, you had, a significant amount of students, 15,000
Right.
moved to a different type. So that's what you're seeing in like Anchorage and those big hub areas, because rural Alaska isn't as drastic as that, but they're choosing a different option.
Yes.
Well, if you're not paying the same for that option, districts are not,
Hmm.
getting funds to support their families.
Right.
So that's significant. But this year, from 24 to 25, we dropped 2,000. So 4,000 in 24 years. So to your point
Wow.
about people, we lost another four just out of correspondence and everything in the
Wow.
state. And
So they're
the
likely
state,
they're independently homeschooling or doing something different.
yes, because the state itself didn't lose that much population.
Yeah.
Schools did.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting. And what's projected for next year is another about 2,000. So
Wow.
now it's going to be about 6 to 8,000 over the last 25 years, but half of that came from the last 2 years. Depending on what next year looks like, I don't know, but they're not leaving because actually the demographics in the state are starting to show an increase.
Now, and how does this mesh with what's happening nationwide? I mean, school choice is a huge thing nationwide, and I know Trump is committed to that. What if
Mhm.
could school choice come in any other way?
Absolutely. I think that part of the USC Ed reorganization is to really support states and their opportunities for education and allow them to utilize some money. Part of the allowances that are actually already allowed in some of the title funds are for supporting families and independent, like when students need you can use those funds for students to get tutoring, to have specialized services, to have advanced coursework, to have IB AP courses paid for. So more so than we're most likely using it now. The entitlement grants that come to the state really do have much more spendability, if you will. And so they're asking for states to really think about and block grant those funds and get them to districts so that even at the district level, they can be innovative and think of, investments in public education. And so, nationwide, we do know that our birth rates are lower. And I would probably guess that those first 25 years and what we're seeing now is definitely lower birth rates as well and movement, as I said, into correspondence. But over the last couple of years, it's more significant than the birth rates prior. Yeah.
Okay. So Kendall has a question. What led to Mississippi's gains in math? And is that something we could replicate here?
Great question. It's really the very similar trajectory as the reading that you invest early in K through 3, and it's really about math literacy, numeracy. It's knowing your facts. It's ensuring that kids know their facts. We and if you think about it, the brain science behind this is just because I'm a math teacher. So you might have a child that says 6 times 7, and you give them that simple problem. And kids should know what that answer is right away. It's 42. Those kids that have to count that out, that is using their cognitive ability to count it out. So even though if you think about kids, if this kid does it and knows it right away, and this child knows it, but it takes them a minute because they have to count it out, there is a difference of processing in those children. And as you move up in your math abilities, you are going to have a glass ceiling put on you when you have multiple level problems like algebra that you have multiple. So if you don't know the simple facts, that is going to hinder you in those that multi-level problems because all of your cognitive ability is focused on figuring out what 6 times 7 is. And so the theory in reading is the same. When you are the prosody or the speed and how you say it, how it comes out of your mouth, the fluency and prosody of how you work does matter because it really is kind of that ownership. Like you really, really know when you know your facts, you really know your facts. Like when you can spill them off and your kids can, say, 3 plus 4, they know what that is before going like this. So we can say kids can still get the correct answer, and we're happy for that. But kids that actually have numeracy with some accuracy and speed are in their brain. That processing is going to help them as they matriculate and have really higher and higher details. So what Mississippi did is with math is exactly what they did with literacy, is to ensure those building blocks of automaticity of kids knowing the sounds of words, knowing how to put words together. The same is true for kids. If you might be able to sound it out, look at pictures, but if you don't have those skills, by the time you get to multisyllabic biology words where there's no pictures in your book, you're going to be struggling. So that is the idea behind that numeracy and literacy, is the automaticity, being able to automatically do it. Like, we don't think of a baby, we teach them how to walk, take one step and they struggle and they fall, but we all don't have to think about walking anymore. That's how we want to get with kids, with their sounds and their letter combinations, as well as with their math and it's addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, that we want those facts down, because then they own them, they have them, and that cognitive ability can be used for higher level. So we are keeping an eye on that. And I believe, I'm hoping the legislature and the governor, as well as the department, can move forward with that once we, have under our belt the success of the READS Act and moving forward. We're still, in our second year of implementation for the READS Act.
Now, I know there was something put into the governor's bill about the use of cell phones. And is that agreed upon, that we're going to kind of go away from cell phone use in the classroom? Is that research based?
I hope so. I hope so. Thank you for asking that. And I hope you read about this. The Anxious Generation is a great book.
Yes.
It really talks about the damage that we know are being done to young people. The algorithms are designed to capture their brain. And again, I'm really a nerd, you guys. I love this stuff. So through brain imaging, they found that even after a push or a like or things like that, that your brain is tied to that for another 20 minutes. And so to say that, oh, I can multitask, that really isn't true. So number one, just the capture of your brain and that focus is captured for 20 minutes after you see a like or after you read something. And so that's dangerous. And that's why we want it banned through the whole entire school day, not allowed at lunch, not allowed passing times, because it is accumulative, that it lasts. But in addition, really for young people, the social media is not good. It is probably a lot of the cause of the mental stress and depression that our kids are having. The focus is captured. Things that, if you think about it, likes and something that is positive, like a puppy, is shared, it's shared, but something that is mean is shared 7 times in the research, 7 times more likely to share something mean, 7 times more likely to post a fight. So the focus around that of what gets likes and shares is negative and taxing on young people. And some people have said, well, parents can control that they just don't have that. And interesting, this book did the research that it's actually more pressure on kids when only the one parent takes it away, because
Right.
they get more social negativity put towards them for being that kid. And that it really takes parents together, schools together, to ban and not have those cell phones that they do capture. And it is not productive. And a great school that did this, and I was just impressed. I talked with the principal there. They did it on their own, is Palmer High School. It was a little struggle at the beginning of the year because people just didn't know it. Every academic and behavioral issue, like tardies to class or fights in the school or anything, every single negative thing that would happen that they have to record went down, and every single positive thing like grades and
Wow.
engagement went up. He took me to his cafeteria and he's like, look. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, it was loud, it was noisy. And he goes, this would have been silent last year,
Wow.
because everyone would be sitting next to each other just on their own, and the kids are interacting. And so I am hoping that goes through. And I just want parents to be aware that this is what they say, that we protected our kids and society because we think bad things are out there, where really in our neighborhoods we should give them more freedom, and we've underprotected them online where we think it's safe.
Yeah.
And so if we could flip that and let them have some of those outdoor experiences of building forts and being in their neighborhoods, is
Mhm.
much more successful than having screen time.
Right.
And children are underprotected because the bad guys are getting into them this
Yeah.
March, you know.
Yeah, that I just got done reading that book, and it feels like we're going to be on the precipice of a mental health crisis, if not has already started, since COVID and people being kind of hooked up to screens all the time. That's not really what they were designed for, especially in those early years. And this is really the first
Mhm.
true generation that's grown up with this for so many years. We're seeing
Mhm.
ADHD on the rise and all these other symptoms on the rise.
Absolutely.
And that's can't be good for education as well. So I have another couple questions I want to get in. Let's see. Can
Anxious Generation
Yes,
is
The
the
Anxious
great book.
Generation.
Yeah.
Great, great read. Can the Alaska standards be changed from following Common Core to a classical education model?
You know what? Absolutely, they can be changed, and movement towards that, and it just takes work and engagement in it. And there is a cycle for the change, and I know that social studies has become a little bit more broad, in adding in financial literacy and other things, and civics, more civics, and we did just update those. But absolutely, it's possible. I don't know. The schedule of that and the push for that right now. I'd have to get where we are. The things that were changed were around the reading for early students. That did take a change of the standards, just because we had to, we had to address that learning. But it's absolutely possible. But a lot of schools, though, have the ability to adjust. And that's why we need that classical education. If it's a desire, we should have programs that offer that in our public schools and allow for that, even if standards can't be changed, that deviation, so that the needs can be met in that area. And there are some in our schools now.
Right? Like the charter schools, you think, what are they doing right? It's like, well, they're not all doing the same thing. I mean, I have my kids in two schools, Family Partnership Charter School and Frontier, both with ASD, but we can essentially do what we want with our kids' education. And so to me, it's purely the choice that is
Mhm.
causing that to rise, because how much more local can you get than parents? That's
Yeah,
local as it
that
gets.
local control. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's just a longstanding fear. I just don't know it, because I really challenge my colleagues. I was just down in Juneau with some principals that I worked with, and they had a fly-in, and some superintendents. And when they, of course, they didn't do it in a big room. When I was like, well, let's talk about it with everybody. But when they came and talked to me, um, they said, well, this is why we're not doing this. And I said, well, tell me how you think that works. Like, tell me, like, it's a fear of someone tell them this language is bad, rather than thinking it out on their own and saying, no, what school would you like to work in? What kind of environment would you like to work in? And what kind of environment would you like your children in? And when we really peel back the rhetoric and the negative talk around it, that is popular, that it's just we can't do it, you really see that actually we all want this. We all want the best education for our kids. We want to empower our parents. And I'm going to tell you, like, I share this a lot with parents and principals that talk to me when I don't get to work with a lot of people who really do the real work now. We're like bureaucracy, because I work for a state. But when I get into schools, and when I was working with principals and teachers, I could take any program in the school that we had, whether it was like immersion schools or the gifted program or something, and I could drill back to give me some characteristics of the people who use this. And guess what it was? And I challenged them. Educators. Educators are built into the system, so they just know the system, so they know the levers to pull, when to get their kid tested, when this should happen, when they do this, and which school to go to. So when you're inside the system, you understand that. And I just challenge them, like, you use your opportunities to put your kid where you want. Why wouldn't you want that for every parent? I
Right.
challenge them that way, and I've had lots of conversations that way. And
Right.
when to get tested for gifted, like they know,
Mhm.
and when to do this. And so that knowledge is just because they have the beauty of working within a school. And I'm happy for that. And I want them to be able to go to school with their children and enjoy their children while they work. So I'm not blaming anyone. I'm
Right.
just saying, why wouldn't you want that for other parents who don't necessarily work in a school?
Yeah.
And so when I do it that way, I can kind of get the disposition to change a little bit. It's like, yeah, don't you enjoy being able to make a recommendation for the teacher you want? Don't you enjoy being able to drive your kid to that other school because they're allowing you to go?
Right.
Wouldn't we want that for everybody?
Yeah, and don't you think that that choice would also trickle down to benefiting the teachers as well, and where they get
Oh
to
no,
work, how
it
they get to.
absolutely does. They get to pick what school they want to work in and they apply for it and they
Mhm.
get to go to a charter school or they get to go to a traditional school. They get to go to like I know some parents who are highly active. Well, now their kids are grown, but kids were friends with mine and they chose to work they moved from a traditional high school and moved to an alternative school because the hours at the alternative school, their school ended like at 2:30 and the alternative school ended at 1:30 because then the kids got on the bus and went and they moved to the alternative school and they enjoyed it, but the initial move was so that they could spend more time at their kids because they would get off earlier. Their kids were in a different town than they were in, the same municipality but a different town, and they could get off in Anchorage and drive to their kids' school in Eagle River and be there for every after school activity.
Wow.
Well, so they moved to a different school just so that they can focus on their family. And then they ended up staying there because they liked it for like 20 some odd years. So they were able to experience all those things that they chose to prioritize their children and their
Right.
children's high school experience.
Yeah.
They got to and so it is an opportunity for teachers. It is an opportunity for principals. And it should be an opportunity for our children and parents as well.
And I would think especially high achieving teachers would want different opportunities, would want what Dunleavy is trying to work into that bill as far as like incentives for doing well. A lot of times
Mm-hmm.
when there's disengagement that happens and you pull back when you realize it's nobody's going to get rewarded for anything different that
Right.
they do or that they try or any innovation or anything. And let's just keep it mediocre. Like if
Mm-hmm.
that's what
Yeah.
gets rewarded, it's not surprising that we can't find teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Good teachers
Mm-hmm.
to keep.
Yeah. I
So
know they um teachers I always say are at the Gimba, they're with parents at the basic level of on the front lines where the value's added. And really if we had excellent opportunities for teachers to work in environments that really let them thrive, as well as let children thrive, it is going to be it will be an amazing day and we will be so successful in getting there and focusing on that classroom, no matter what kind of school it's in, it is going to do us all well.
there are so many obstacles to this. So I encourage you to get engaged if you believe in school choice. You don't often hear from this side of the conversation, do you? Do you hear do
No.
because
Yeah.
we're all kind of doing our own thing. We're not part of a group like the NEA or something like that where we can mobilize very quickly. But there are, like you said, what, 23,000 students that will be
Mhm.
affected. And
Mhm.
some of the changes in this new bill, 69, HB 69, are going to diminish some of our freedoms, aren't they?
I mean, they're trying to.
Mhm.
Mhm. And the governor, really, I had a conversation with him today, and we're going back. I think we're in Senate Finance where we have a better opportunity to speak about education with people that understand money and education and allowable freedoms. And so we look to really negotiate a better bill than the one before us is absolutely awful.
Wow.
Mhm.
So I have a one.
I mean, it has money, but it doesn't. It is not. If you're different than the neighborhood school, it's not going to be good for you. Yeah.
Right. Then that is very concerning. So when should they write in or testify, or are there certain dates that we need to know about?
Yep. So the governor's bill is going to be heard in the House on Wednesday, but really letting your senator know and or your representative know what you value in education, that you want opportunities, and it isn't one for another. We're not trading off. We're just saying that
Mhm.
as we move forward, empower families to have these choices. But what they're doing is dwindling the resources to the choices, which then will make it difficult
Right.
keep them operating. And so allowing for choice of parents to choose a school, which is that open enrollment, allowing for what they're just putting some demands on um, homeschool that you're not going to get your allotment unless you test. I just see that as they don't do that for regular schools. Every parent has the option to opt out in Alaska. So
Yeah.
they're not doing equal protection for students and their parents.
Right.
Some students and parents are allowed to opt out, so not others. And I think that's when we start treating each other different because I think that's a problem. It's
And the BS.
problematic. I think we can incentivize assessments rather than degrading the money that we have to go into education.
And it's true that if you're part of a charter or alternative program, that you only get 0.9% of the BSA.
If you are in a correspondence, you get zero point 0.9 of the BSA and you don't get any other funds for school size factor or those special needs or
Multipliers, yes.
CTE,
Hmm.
no multipliers. So it is very limited. And that was the governor's goal because these resources would go to schools to be able to support their correspondence schools. I
Yeah,
mean, to districts rather,
right.
and schools.
Yeah, I had a special education teacher that I work with, and she works as an independent teacher, and she said she's having more than one special needs student coming out of the traditional education because it's not working for them, and she's
Mhm.
coming to her saying, "Can you educate my high needs kid?" And she said, "I can't afford to do that because there's no multipliers, there's no
Yeah.
extra funding,"
Yeah.
and she's had to turn them away just in tears, and
Hmm.
that to me
Hmm.
that's really sad.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
Someone has a final doozy of a question here. What are your thoughts on dismantling of the Department of Education benefits to Alaska?
Yeah. Well, I see it a reorganization of the department, and I'm a believer that the different functions, whether they be student loans, are going to go to the Department of Treasury as the plan. Office of Civil Rights will go to law, the Department of Justice. So they have a plan for all the different pieces, but for traditional school things that we think about, the discretionary and the entitlement grants that are in deed. We also get nutrition services, but that's from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that they look to actually add flexibility. So I am looking forward to having the states receive block grants. And understanding a block grant right now, you might have a migrant student and you have migrant money for migrant student, and then you have maybe a title student that is really meant for disadvantage financially. And what this looks like to a teacher is students come to my classroom and the migrant person is allowed to work with one student when lots of students have needs. And so we really want to couple the money and block to say, these are all the needs, and you don't have to have this special label. Let's just say, where are the needs? And then how do we service our students for that? And in special education, it would benefit because sometimes you're special ed, you could be low and migrant. You could be, and you're not going to have two different programs trying to, drill on you. You combine them and the resources for them, and then the parent serves. The service model is going to be targeted on the need, not on the label. And so I look forward to being able to work with districts and superintendents and principals to really be able to allow for that flexibility of funds that the Department of Ed isn't defining, the state more is defining. The protections are there for why we have it, because they're congressionally approved and appropriated for a reason. And as long as we meet those, we're not going to have the multiple layers. And one other thing is the reporting requirements are tremendous. So interesting enough, the CTE money that comes through Carl Perkins, a lot of our districts, smaller districts, turn it away because the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Like it's so much paperwork for them to receive the 40,000 because they're smaller. They're like, I would rather not have that. I can get my own 40,000 because it takes me that much in input to be able to keep those records. So we're really looking at this. I look at it as a cup half full. I think it's a new time. They're really supporting those funds to be able to allow purchases of, like I said, individual courses at the local level so that schools and districts can use those funds to purchase college courses, gifted courses, tutoring, extra intervention courses, and really tailoring it to their community's need instead of kind of this system. You're focusing on the kids and the needs rather than the system. And I look forward to that.
Right. The students over the system. That's a great way to end this. And I know we have so many more questions. It feels like we just opened up this huge can of worms and we could talk forever, but this has been really informative. And I thank
Yep.
you for
Thank
your
you.
time, Commissioner Bishop. Thank you guys for coming and asking great questions. And let's just try to keep this conversation alive with your legislators. They need to hear from us, even though we're kind of like, it feels like the David and Goliath type situation right now, but we're not against each other. We can work together. We just want to level the playing field and empower parents to make those choices for their kids. So thank you for all you're doing.
All right. Thank you so much. It's a
All
joy.
right.
Let me know if you ever need me back.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Bye.